Welcome to the newest episode of the Caucus Corner. Each week, we bring legislators and New Yorkers together to discuss some of the most pressing issues from the perspective of people of color. I am your host, Assemblymember Mikhail Salaj, chair of the Black, Puerto Rican, Hispanic, and Asian Legislative Caucus. In today's episode, we explore the dual nature of the New York State gaming industry. While the revenue generated from activities such as commercial betting, horse racing, sports wagering, and fantasy sports can be used to support and improve our communities, it's critical to recognize the dual nature. This episode sheds light on both the positive and negative aspects of the industry. We have members from the State Assembly and Senate Racing Wagering Committee, as well as advocates who combat problem gambling within our state on a daily basis. Before we dive into our discussion, I'd like to give each one of our esteemed guests the opportunity to introduce themselves.
Good morning. This is Gary Fretlow. I'm the chairperson of the Racing and Wagering Committee of the New York State Assembly. I've been doing this for a long time, and I guess I'm the father of most of the gaming entities we have in the state of New York right now, with the exception of horse racing. You know, we started BLTs several years ago and moved into sports betting, and now we're moving into commercial casinos. You know, so I'm not going to go into the whole thing that we do. I hope that some conversation we can discuss the various areas of gaming in the state of New York.
And you are really a cornerstone in the Assembly's fight and work and ensuring that we have a loud voice when it comes to, the industry. So we thank you. And next, I really want to introduce the head of the New York City PGRC, Director Alcee James. Can you introduce yourself?
Yes, good morning. Thank you for having me here this morning. Excuse me. But I'm with the New York City Problem Gambling Resource Center. We're funded by OASIS, and the funding goes to the New York Council on Problem Gambling, which is a not-for-profit corporation that's committed to increasing public awareness about gambling harms and advocating for services and treatment for those who are adversely affected by gambling. The council also maintains a neutral stance on gambling. So we're just there to go into the communities and do outreach to educate and get to people who need treatment.
And we appreciate your work on that. Now I'd like to introduce one amazing senator that we have on the line, who's a member of the Racing and Wagering Committee and represents a place called Queens. I heard where dreams are made of. Senator Leroy Comrie. If you could introduce yourself.
Thank you, Chairwoman Salajis. I'm Leroy Comrie. I'm honored to be the state senator for the 14th Senate District, which compromises to encapsulates the communities of Laurelton, Cambridge Heights, North South Queens Village, South Hollis, South Jamaica, parts of Briarwood, Kew Gardens Hills, and St. Albans. So this is my 10th year in the state Senate. I'm honored to have served this community. Also 12 years in the City Council. I am the chair of the Corporations, Authorities, and Commissions Committee as well in the New York State Senate, which the communities I represent include not Aqueduct, but in Belmont. So I've been very much involved working with Assembly members Salajis on Belmont, helping to bring in the first Long Island Railroad train station in 40 years to the Elmont area. Also working to help create the UBS Arena and other projects. As the Assemblyman said, I'm on the Racing, Gaming, and Wagering Committee, and have been happy to work with Senator Joe Adabo and Assemblymember Pretlow on these issues around what we do to create opportunities for full casino operations in New York State.
We thank our guests. Now let's just jump right into the conversation. And as you said, Assemblymember Pretlow, you've really have seen the gambling industry grow here in New York State. So for our first-time listeners, I know you're a second-time guest, but for our first-time listeners, can you kind of give us an overview of what's going on in New York State? What does the gambling industry look like from, Montauk to Buffalo?
Well, currently the largest item that we're working on with the perspective of gaming in New York are the downstate casino licenses. Several years ago, I think it was 8 years ago, we passed legislation The Constitutional Amendment was done where we allowed up to 7 commercial casinos in the state of New York. 4 of them were going upstate and 3 of them going downstate. Downstate being Westchester, Rockland, the 5 boroughs, Nassau, and Suffolk counties. We're in the process now of issuing those licenses. And there's been a lot of concern because we have up to 17 entities that are vying for these 3 licenses. So goes without saying that there's a lot of competition going on here, and people are trying to maneuver themselves to get one of those lucrative licenses. It's said that if there were a commercial casino in the Manhattan, it would probably be the most highest grossing casino in the world. But there are issues in getting a casino in Manhattan. A lot of the individuals that live there really don't want that in their community. The city council just passed legislation called the text amendment where they're allowing zoning for any entities that do want to build in the city of New York. But that's, I live in Westchester, and there's a entity in Westchester, MGM, that's currently located at Yonkers Raceway. They're looking for a license, and of course, the big guy around is Genting at Aqueduct Racetrack. They're also one of the bidders. We're trying to speed the process up right now. There's been a delay because to go through what's called Europe in the city of New York, it's up to a 2-year process, and entities that are interested in building a casino in the city of New York will be delayed up around 2 years, maybe even more, in getting their zoning taken care of. So that's the thing we're working on there. With regards to BLTs, we started that 8-10 years ago. And that's at all the racetracks. What that did basically was the revenue.
And just for our listeners, what does VLT mean?
Video lottery terminal. They're actually electronic lottery tickets, if you want to boil it down. All of the revenue that the state gets from the BLTs goes to education. So far, we put maybe $15 billion into education since this started. It's been a good program, and there have been some complaints about people that are gambling to over what they should be gambling, over their maximum. I know we're going to get into problem gambling in a while. I know Oasis is on this podcast, so we'll talk more about that with them. But like right now, my concern is getting the downstate casinos up and running and generating revenue for the state of New York. Before I sign off on this, I just want to talk about sports betting. We brought sports betting into New York like 2 years ago, and it immediately took over the dominance of sports betting in the United States. In the first year of operation, New York State took in over $1 billion of tax revenue for the state of New York, which surpassed the combined tax revenue of New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Washington, Delaware, and a few other states combined. So we're doing very, very well in our sports betting area.
Gambling has gone through a huge transformation in New York State over the past 5 years. And, I really want to now take a deeper dive and allow our listeners to get kind of what's impact of what's happening and in our state. So with some of the recent changes in the gaming industry here in New York State, Senator, Assembly Member, how has that impacted New Yorkers' regular, everyday lives?
I think it's created opportunities, especially in the employment area. And these jobs are averaging $40,000 to $80,000 a year minimum to start, depending on the jobs. They also are union jobs with full benefits and services. They've created construction opportunities in the community and the local communities as well. And it's also as the Assemblyman pointed out, for billions of dollars in tax revenue into our state to help the education budget and to offset other losses in revenue. Unfortunately, the state budget keeps growing in need, especially now that we are dealing with more immigrants coming into the state than ever before. And this is a way to make sure that we can have revenue that can meet these ever-growing needs in New York State.
I'll jump in. I guess more of the benefits are prior to our legalization of gaming opportunities, people were gambling, but they were gambling online. They were gambling with entities outside of the country. People were running the risk of having their identity stolen because they didn't know who they were really gambling with. And just in the area of sports betting, over $10 billion a year was being bet on mobile or sports betting offshore. And most of that revenue was going to organized crime entities or foreign governments. We didn't know where they were going. And children were on these websites, and they may still be, but we're trying to stop that. But there are protections now for people that are gaming legally in the state of New York. And like the senator said, the tax revenue has been phenomenal. And this is why we can have the contributions to education that we do. Billions of dollars annually are going into our education system for our young people, which I think is a very good thing.
And just to give some statistics, like sports betting in New York State secured $2.9 billion in revenue from 2022 until the beginning of 2024, which that is a large number in retrospect. And this stems from the 33.7 billion in wages being placed in those 2 years. So what does that mean for the bottom line for investment in our community?
Well, the jobs that are created for this, we really, all of these companies have to be located in the state of New York. So any entity that's doing gaming in New York, they have to have their operations in the state of New York. My goal has always been tax revenue. And I have personally not seen any detrimental effects to at least the community that I represent having to do with gaming. I do know that the lotteries now, if you look at how fast the jackpots rise, from 30 million to $1 billion in a month and a half. That's just a testament to how many people are playing these games. And I guess you could say we're making some people wealthy. It's unfortunate though that some communities that you and I and Senator Comrie represent have been, well, it's been said that they're being targeted. But we represent poorer districts, respectively. And, people have always said Louis Lotto with the dollar to dream. Yeah, it is a dream. And I always tell people, bet responsibly. Don't bet the paycheck on the lottery. The odds of winning are not that good. To win the Powerball, 273 million to 1. And if you buy 2 tickets, that doesn't cut your odds in half. It's still 273 million to 1. But people enjoy doing it, and it's we look at it as more like recreation and something to do with hopefully excess cash.
And I noticed before we jump into the problem of gambling addiction, when I visited recent casinos, I as a member of the Racing and Wagering Committee, I saw a lot of people working behind the tables and around from our community. And so, the job aspect is a really important point as well, because they hire a lot of our folks.
Yes, and that's we really mandate that. We want them to do that. We have the FWBE requirements, and I know you're very familiar with that. We demand that people from our communities are participating in these jobs. And as the senator said earlier, these are high-paying jobs. These aren't minimum wage. People making $60,000, $70,000 working in the restaurants, in the casinos or in the racinos. I mean, these are really good jobs, and the companies do draw from the community, and I think that's a good thing.
So
Definitely.
recently, oh,
I was
Senator.
just going to say ditto on the times when I've attended events at resorts. I never fail to see no less than 10 people from my district that are working there, 10 different people every time I go. So there's a lot to local opportunities and local employments. And also the, the the casino, Genting has done a fabulous job of doing charitable work throughout my district and throughout Queens. And they haven't turned down anybody's request for a charity or opportunities for them to do events or do outreach to people. And they're constantly sending out employment opportunities throughout Queens for people as well. So it's definitely a focal point for people to come and find all types of jobs.
Recently, I saw that they were supposed to make a decision on these downstate casinos, but there was a delay. Can we elaborate that? And what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I had mentioned that earlier, why there's a delay. It has to do with the authority for a casino to open up in the city of New York. Not too much of an issue in Westchester or Long Island, but there is an issue in the city of New York because they have, usage problems, and we're trying to get past that, and that's what's caused the delay. We really should be up and running right now with the 3 licenses, but because of the zoning issues, it's slowed it down tremendously.
And to be from my point of view, we shouldn't be slowing down the process to wait for something that may never happen. Zoning and land use issues. I was I was honored in my 12 years in the city council to always serve on the land use committee. My last 4, I was chair of the land use committee. Those are variables that may never get solved in any short period of time. And we need this revenue. As members, we're constantly being bombarded with requests. As you all know from this year's budget, we couldn't meet everybody's budget requests. We were, I think, $40 billion short in the request from what people are asking for to what we could do. We can only increase our budget by so much because of the fact that we don't have revenue. And the needs for our city and state, the need for full-time after schools, the need for better pay for nurses and for nursing home workers. There's so many needs that we weren't able to solve in the budget. If we could have revenue that's not taxing, because we can't tax people forever. We're one of the highest tax states as it is. This is a source of revenue that we truly need to help offset our ever-increasing budget, as I said earlier. And now that we have more migrants flowing into our state than ever before because of the conditions around the world, they're not going to stop coming, even whatever happens on the federal level. People are always going to want to come to New York. We have to be able to continue to provide services, and we can't do it through taxing people. We can do it by bringing these casinos online that are promised $1 billion in revenue. That's something that we truly need. So while I understand, that somebody may want to have a casino in mid-Manhattan, and the other issue is that most of these places that they're trying to put these casinos, they have violent opposition, just to be modest, from those communities that they're trying to put the casinos in, wherein we have other places that are already ready and able to operate without having to worry about land use issues or getting the approval of communities. So it's just, why are we hesitating on what we can have as opposed to waiting on what we may never get?
Agreed. And so before we jump into the next topic, I want to give an opportunity, Senator, Assemblymember, are you working on any other gaming legislation? Right
now, my focus is on downstate casinos. There are other there is legislation having to do in the industry, but it's not really related to this kind of conversation or having to do with backstrap workers at racetracks and things of that nature.
That sounds like another episode of the Caucus Corner, right?
That would be another episode, totally.
Definitely.
So, you know, yeah, according to recent studies, Black men between the ages of 18 and 24 are one of the highest risks for gambling addiction, with AAPI and other BIPOC communities not too far behind. And so when we talk about a demand for justice as our theme this year for the caucus, it's apparent that we also need to address the addictive cycle. And so I'll see, you know, what have you been doing? What has your organization been doing to combat the issue and ensure that we're empowering communities to stop addiction?
Well, first thing I'd like to address how it's been affecting, how the gaming has affected people that we connect with. As a result of the changes in the gaming, there's been an increase in call volume to our Hope Line and the Problem Gambling Resource Center clinicians. So the stats that Oasis has shows that there's a 7% increase in calls from 23 to 22, and people accessing inpatient services for harms related to their gambling has increased 17% in 2023. And 6% have an increase for those seeking outpatient services. And you know, gambling is a hidden addiction, unlike alcohol and drugs, because those are visible effects. Gambling addiction isn't invisible, and most families are negatively impacted, resulting in domestic violence, unhoused children, crimes, suicide, and so on. And according to the studies, the people between ages of 18 and 24 are one of the highest risks for to succumb to gambling. Black men, non-Hispanic men are there in general in the highest group. And to assist in combating these issues, we had to go into communities and actually have community conversations. We had to change our approach. We were doing screeners that people didn't want to answer questions. So we found that we had to ask the questions in a different way, because people in our communities don't see gambling as a problem, because it's actually a way of resources for them. So we had to go into the community and ask them differently and find out what do they see, what is their attitude towards gambling, because it's favorable. People grow up playing games, and it's, you know, that's just what we do to socialize. So we've had to go in and have the conversations. And we've also had to, we've had to translate materials, because in the Asian communities, people are actually targeted by the casinos because they bust them in with a $45 voucher, and that's where they go for recreation, just for socializing, and to get money sometimes, because they're below the income level of $30,000. We've also had to assist and encouraging places that have screening, like centers for treatment. No one asks the question, do you gamble, or what do you do for recreation? Because asking a simple question of how do you gamble, because people don't, and it's not don't use the word gambling, but they have to say, well, do you play lotto? Do you buy scratch-offs? How often? Simple questions like that, to learn what they're actually doing in their spare time. So we've been trying to change the attitude and the climate, and engage the communities to see how, if they're ready to acknowledge and learn appropriate approaches to gambling and safety, and it's responsible gambling. One thing that we don't talk about is that gambling has led to a lot of suicides that's not talked about, because no one asks the question with veterans and some police officers.
And can you speak to the effectiveness of peer support groups or counselings that are being offered? Because sometimes there's a taboo and people are afraid that these programs are not effective.
Well, the peer support is very effective to me, because when you have someone with lived experience coming in to help you, because they're speaking from a place where you can relate to, and they they come in and they kind of put you at ease, and they help people even get services that they weren't aware that they could access. So the peers are very important. We're trying to use peers for our alliance, so we'll have a 24-hour call lines, so people can call at 2 o'clock in the morning when they're in a casino and they're spazzing out or ready to like really do something terrible. So we're trying to get that. That might be coming around soon.
And how do addiction services, how do they adapt to the emerging trends or the changes in the gaming industry, especially with the rise of online gambling platforms?
Well, we're trying to infuse gambling awareness services into organizations that provide prevention, gambling designated treatment, and recovery in specific areas. And we're actually doing the research now with Oasis funds the New York, the statewide problem gambling resource centers. And what they're doing now is they're doing the needs assessments to know how to go, where to go, and how to give people help. We're doing key informant interviews and surveys to gauge a culturally effective approach. And we're also doing environmental scans. So we're trying to go into the communities, see what level where they are, and prepare them for preparing them for this onslaught of even the casinos, and giving them information on how to get help.
And I want to make sure that we also give that the Hope line, which, as you said, is available 24 hours. The number is 1-877-846-7369. Is there other resources out there for individuals looking for help?
Well, when you call the Hope line, you will be directed. We have right now the PGRC has about 120 clinicians on staff. And when we try to connect the people with the proper clinician, someone who speaks the language, because that's one problem. We don't have a lot of clinicians from the Asian population who speak their language, and they need someone who can relate to them. But we try to match a clinician with the person who's calling in for help. The family members who call in for help, we're connecting them with Gamanon and Gambling Anonymous associations. So we're trying to get help for the family, the gambler themselves, and the people that they're surrounded by.
And people can also text as well the line, right? They could text Hope New York, which is 467369.
Yes, thank you.
Oh, no problem. And so I just thank you and your organization for providing that support and thinking out of the box of how we can get, the average New Yorker support. So we are at the end of our program. I thank all my guest speakers for this wonderful conversation. Do you have any last words, Senator Assembly Member and Elsie?
Well, I just like to say that gambling responsibly is very important, and it does create jobs. The casinos create jobs for everyone, but be responsible. I would like to see casinos be responsible and give certain, like the Empire on their floors. They have literature for the patrons to see how to gamble responsibly. So I just want to see casinos be responsible for the people who will come into their casinos and providing information.
Well, I appreciate Elsie. We will make sure from our end that they're doing everything they can to put those signs up. I believe I saw signs at resorts, but I will double check with them, and I'm sure that they'll be cooperative. And also, whatever we can do to help support your organization, please let us know. So if there's legislation required, we can look into it right away. But thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for your vigilance in making sure that there's a balance to this process. Thank you, Assemblymember Salages, for holding this podcast, and I look forward to continuing to work with you and Assemblymember Pretlow and Senator Dabo on working out everything that's needed to make sure that this industry is running properly and efficiently, but also creating the opportunities to make sure that if folks are gambling, that they're spending their money with New York State institutions.
And just in closing, I said you'd asked me earlier about pending legislation. One of the things that we are working on and will happen is increased funding to Oasis to deal with problem gambling. Now they get a percentage of the revenue we want to increase that percentage, so there's more money available for problem gambling. Getting that done. Mikhail, I want to thank you for doing this. I think that it's an important topic and something that our communities should be aware of.
And I thank you all for joining us. And we encourage our listeners to follow us on social media. We're on every platform at BPHA Caucus, and we look forward to continuing to demand for justice. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.